It's Sunday, ladies and Germinators. You know what that means. Time for the LICNY podcast. Red Hush.
Don't you try and tell me, man, what's right for me to do. Just remember what's good for me ain't good for you. I just keep my nasty ways, shove it in your face. You can step in out of line, put you in your place. Baby, what you gotta say? Maybe, you just made my day. Alright, smoke a little freedom fly, fly. Touch a little piece of the sky, look out.
Hey, Larry.
Hi, Hank. So you have something to show me?
Yeah, follow me, huh?
So what is it? Is that a doobie?
Uh-huh.
No thanks, I'm cool.
Come on. It'll be fun.
All right.
Yeah. It's an old PSA, old public service announcement, telling you what can happen. That's right. It's crazy, isn't it? It is crazy. Well, welcome once again to the LICNY Sunday podcast. It is Sunday, October 27th, 2019. I'm Gary Colby here in the LICNY studio, located in the back of Gary's Music here in the beautiful downtown Rome, New York's Arts District. It's a lousy, cold, rainy day in the fall. What better way to spend it in here talking to you? Hopefully helping you to debunk reefer madness whenever you can, at every turn, whenever possible. Much appreciated if you do, because you're doing yourself a huge favor when you do that. You're fighting for your own freedom, and that's what we're here about. To debunk reefer madness, to give you ammunition for when you have conversations with others, no matter where you may be, at home, at work, everywhere and anywhere, with family members, with friends, with enemies, with frenemies. Speak the truth. And to speak the truth, you have to know the truth. That's what we're here to tell you. The truth. So as I put on the group website, on the Facebook group page, today I thought we'd talk about cannabis and kids. Cannabis and kids. So let me open up the page to where we began to talk about that yesterday. And see if we got any replies. I put something up last night asking for you folks to pipe in if you could. And yeah, I know it was late, so you may not have had a chance to do it yet. And I'm looking for the page again. Okay. So we did get a couple commenters. But as I said, and I'll read what I put up last night regarding today, tomorrow's podcast, meaning today, is about crafting a solid factual response to one of the most often argued questions surrounding legalization. What about the children? Well, what do you think? Are you a parent? What was it like between you and your parents? Are you a grandparent like I am? Were you a DARE student? How will you deal with it then? How would you deal with it? if you were to catch your kid with cannabis. And I said I'd love to respond to your input and asked what you folks had to say. Here's Joan, says it's better. It's better to be caught lying by a kid. Oh, I'm sorry. It's best never to be caught lying by a kid. A little speck in my eye there. It didn't sound right to me either. I don't have one living here, so I'm good. Just kidding. Why can't a parent keep their smoking private out of the house for sure? And if the kid finds out, use the adult excuse, yeah, kid, once you're 18, you're good to go. No lying allowed. Yeah. That makes sense. And the point, I think, the main point there is kids are smart. Kids are smart and we shouldn't lie to them. And it turns out that's exactly what we were doing when we started a program called DARE. That's exactly what we were doing. And I think I may have some ammunition here to show to you. Yeah. DARE was a program that started in the early 90s, I believe. And you may have kids who went through it. You may be an adult now who went through it. And as it turns out, DARE was a failure. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. Here's where 9 major studies reveal the DARE program actually makes drug problem worse. Yeah. You know, when you did the analysis following the students that went through the DARE program for years after, they were actually more likely, mathematically speaking and factually speaking, they were more likely to take harder drugs. I think even LSD was mentioned. They were more likely than kids that didn't go through the program. So not only did it not help, it actually hurt. And it turns out that that's because you put kids in a room and tell them things are bad for them. That whole approach, yeah, that doesn't work. That's just bad for you. And although, you know, we do it all the time, you can't. And that's not really based in reality, is it? I mean, the kids are going to do what? They're going to go right out and try it. Did you? Ask and answer yourself. But that's where we are with kids, and we're approaching a time, as other states have, and maybe you know some folks in other states, and you could give us some input as to how it works. But what happens when legalization does come to pass? What happens when there are retail establishments, dispensaries, marijuana stores, whatever you want to call them? What happens when other kids' parents work in the cannabis industry and your kids interact with those kids? How do you handle that? How are you going to handle it when you drive by a dispensary and there's people waiting in line very patiently, very nicely? Dispensary could be right across from the Dunkin' Donuts, could be right across from the grocery store or any number of other businesses. Because as we know, dispensaries do make great retail neighbors, what with their police presence and their extra security. And last but not least, the business they bring to a business district, not only through their doors, but through the doors of other adjoining businesses. So they are a good thing for business, and any neighborhood who has them will tell you that. They can only be good. Business begets other business. So, but what are you going to tell the kids? Dad, Mom, what are those people doing over there? Well, they're waiting in line for cannabis. Really? What's cannabis? See, you're going to have to find some answers. Some answers that both you can live with and the kids can understand. answers that are true, factual, honest, and also have the realization that kids are going to be kids and there will be natural curiosities. So I wonder, I don't have the answer because each kid's different, each relationship, parent to child, is different. But I would just tell everyone that with legalization comes a new physical, visual, societal group of realities. And those realities have to be addressed in real time, no differently than any other issue. Take, gay marriage, the acceptance of LGBT people across the board openly and beautifully, I might add. So how did you handle that with the kids? Hopefully with facts, truth, and love. Hopefully you listen as much as you talk. Hopefully you don't lecture. And hopefully finally you keep in mind again that kids are very, very smart and kids will be kids and curiosities are going to be there. So I hope you're beginning to formulate what you may say, how you may handle it. I have some ammunition here at the store. At Gary's Music and Gigs, Gary's Indoor Garden Supply here in Rome, New York, if you'd like to pick some up. Particularly this one is a very good pamphlet put out by the Drug Policy Alliance. Safety First, a reality-based approach to teens and drugs. There's a lot here to cover, and I can't do it all in one podcast. And since we are primarily about cannabis, here's another one I like to use for anybody and everybody, also put out by Drug Policy Alliance. It's called Marijuana Facts. And it covers things like, is it true that marijuana has medicinal properties? I mean, it starts right there. You talk about the gateway. Is it a gateway drug? Are more people becoming dependent? Does marijuana impair driving the way alcohol does? So a lot of good points and a lot of good truths and a lot of good real-time facts, data, and studies in these books. And they're free for the taking. If you stop in, I'd be happy to give them to you. But again, like I said, today I just wanted to pipe in and ask, not preach, but more than anything else, ask, have you considered how will you talk to your kids about cannabis? How do you talk to your kids about cannabis? What is your new reality going to be when cannabis becomes legal in New York State? I can tell you what mine is and always has been when it comes to kids. It's always truth. But there's a time and place, just like having the birds and the bees talk, right? There's a time and place to have a serious talk about cannabis and the possible ramifications of using it. And there's an age threshold that I think, or a maturity threshold, which may be different ages for different kids, or out of necessity, when you feel the time is right, that conversation needs to be had. So it's a subjective decision, and I hope you make a good one. But for me, it's always been, because I come from a prohibition history, like most people my age, so there's always that, If you're smart, there's always the thing that you don't leave cannabis out in plain sight, because you just don't do that. I guess it's a little hypocritical, because if you drink alcohol, and I personally don't, but I have, and if you do, it's okay to have some beer or some wine out, and mom and dads and the adults are the only ones that touch that, but God forbid you leave a bong out. But I'm not ready to do that either. I'm not ready to have a bong sitting on the table when the grandkids come over and say, "Oh, that's just Grandpa's bong," and he smokes weed out of there. It's just not necessary, and it's not something I think I need to do. My personal take will be I'm not the parent, obviously, of my grandkids, so the real conversations will happen between their parents and themselves. But it's no secret in my family, among the adults anyway, so far, that I am a cannabis advocate, that I am a cannabis activist, and it's a very important part of who I am and what I do. So I may have to have different conversation at different ages, but the way I envision it is that when the kids are of age, when they're living on their own, making their own decisions and supporting themselves, I would love to have conversations with them from one adult to another. But as a grandfather, I will leave those conversations to the parents, as it should be. And with this caveat, because I think a lot of people, the best among us, the most sincere and the most thoughtful, most loving, probably hope. Well, we don't hope that certainly don't hope that our grandkids, our young kids, will prematurely get involved with cannabis. That's not what we want. No one wants to legalize it for kids. No one wants to put it in kids' hands. But say that it does happen. Did you do it? What age were you? So think about that. Say that it does happen. And use a grandkid for example. I like to think, and maybe my kids or kids-in-law will have no use for it. But I like to think if it happens, and I have 7, so odds are. But if it happens, my family will have a great advantage. The kids will have a great advantage, particularly the kid who decided against parents' advice to use cannabis. The family will have somewhat of an expert, me. And at that point, I think I'd be invaluable to sit with a kid and discuss everything about what the kid has done, about what the kid decided to do. And my goal would be to try to help understand why, where it comes from. Was it curiosity? Because the response would be different than I was really stressed and I was really sad, or I was really apprehensive, or if a kid's trying to self-medicate, then there's probably issues that need to be addressed, and those would be above and beyond what I could offer. But if it's curiosity because they want to know what it feels like, and the other kids were doing it, things like that, well, I have some input there, and surprisingly, it won't be all positive, but it would be honest. My talk to a grandkid would be about knowing what you've entered into, knowing what the cost could be. So you're 15 years old or so, you can jump on YouTube, you can see my podcast, you can see what I'm about. But I would also make sure a youngster understands the societal impacts, whether they be fair or not, and they're certainly not, But the realities, how it can affect you, how it can affect your reputation, how it could affect your education, how it could affect your future employment. These are things we're fighting to change, but it's a long fight. It's been going on for decades, and it's not going to be over really quickly either. So I would have that honest conversation that here's how I feel about the material, cannabis, and here's what I think it does with people, and here's why I think it shouldn't be illegal. But also, here are some facts. It is. And until we change these, you need to know what you're getting into. And it might be a surprise for them to hear it from me. But I will consider myself, and I hope I never have to do it. But if it does happen, I'm ready. And I hope you'll give some thought. And I'm not preaching about what you should do or how you should do it. Every family is different. Every child is different. Every situation is different. But we know what we're fighting for. We know what we're fighting against. And boy, those of us in the cannabis community here in the year 2019 who've been at it for decades also know those horrible ramifications that have gone along with it for all this time. So I hope you'll take some of this to heart. I hope you think seriously about it. Have some conversations. Again, today I talked about the kids. What about the children? Do I have to do the gateway thing? I mean, that's been debunked 20,000 ways to Sunday. The idea that if you try cannabis, you'll automatically go on to other more stronger, harder drugs. Well, the DARE failure proves that's not true. And so does every practical example that we have, except for those, 1 in a million they'll pull out, because there's always one exception that proves every rule. And that's about what there are, So much for the gateway theory. It's nonsense. We know that. So having conversations with kids, I highly recommend that's not going to be a part of it, But to understand also the addictive personality that exists in some people, including kids, either inherently, by example, heredity versus environment, on things like that. I think that conversation should be very, very carefully thought out. And I hope you will. This is going to be a short one this week because I do have things to do. So I hope you will think about, anyway, your conversations about cannabis. And this week, when it comes to kids. Last week we talked about older people, the fastest growing demographic of cannabis users. And we can have really open conversations with them, and we're going to. Because, again, don't forget, December 9th, at the Utica Parkway Senior Recreation Center on the Parkway in Utica, New York, I will face off an County Sheriff, Robert Mashel, in front of a group of seniors in a town hall setting. He and I will discuss cannabis legalization, the pros and cons. And I feel I'll be very fortunate in that being a senior center, I will be addressing the fastest growing demographic of cannabis users. There may not be many there, but I'm going to explain to them openly why they may want to consider it, because it could be an adjunct to much better life for folks like that. But it'll be a spirited conversation. It'll be a great back and forth. It'll be respectful. I promise you it'll be respectful. And I encourage you to come out, and I encourage you to look at the podcast. If you have things that you want the sheriff to hear, if you have questions that you want asked, come and ask me and ask him. I'll try to cover the things that I know are important, but I can't speak for everybody, but you can bring it out of me. You can show up and you can ask me. Even if you know the answer. Even if you know I know the answer, come and ask me so I can answer your question in front of the sheriff, in front of the public. Hopefully the media will be there too, right? Sure do hope so. But until next time, hope you're happy. Hope you have some medicine to keep you happy. Hope it grows from the ground. Hope it's natural. Hope it's all organic. If you're vaping it, be careful. There's some junk out there. It's a whole other story. But be real with each other. And until next time, keep fighting for your freedom. Keep having conversations. Keep debunking reefer madness. And keep arming yourselves with ammunition around truth. Until next time, peace and pot.